Greetings, fellow explorers of the extraordinary. Paranormal M invites you to join us on a journey into the realms of the unexplained. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated with our latest mind-bending revelations. Happy exploring. A paranormal encounter my father experienced when he was a kid. He is very logical, trying to see things with logic and common sense. He's also religious. This encounter, though, is something he really can't explain even to this day. His friends also witnessed this event. I think they were around 8 or 10 kids and teenagers on that night going out. This encounter happened in Greece, in the Greco-Turkish border area during summer of 1969. Summer of 1969. The village my father was living recently electrified that time, receiving power and commodities like street lamps. Before that time, much of the Greek countryside had no access to electricity or running water. This was a big upgrade for the village and its residents' living conditions. My dad, who was a kid back then, and his friends wanted to see how the village looked from afar with the lights at night. The area was very safe at the time, with no wildlife like wolves or bears residing there, and with no threats from people existing. Parents allowed children to wander as much as they wanted. So my dad and his friends, around 8 or 10 children, ages 5 to 15 or 16 I think, went on a trip to see the village at night. They left on sunset approximately. At around midnight or a bit later, they decided to return back. The way back included passing from a strip of dirt road that was sinking for a few centimeters. There is a local legend that this strip of dirt road was haunted by the spirit of a Greek collaborator's wife that was brutally murdered via getting spiked in a wooden pole by insurgents during the World War II German occupation of the area. It was said that it took the form of an Orthodox priest. There was a bulldozer parked on the spot. They were extracting gravel from this place. When the group reached the spot, they stopped. They started feeling fear and the weather started getting cold. They started crossing slowly, feeling afraid. To combat the fear, they started speaking loudly and singing. They had crossed half the road when one of the children, one of the older ones, looked behind and then saw from the bulldozer an Orthodox priest. They were in full uniform, and they were suddenly appearing. The face wasn't visible, and it was hovering a few meters off the ground. It started following the group in a steady pace with a distance of a few meters. The guy froze in fear, but didn't say anything to not upset the group and the young children they had with them. A bit later, another guy turned behind and saw the priest. He panicked and screamed, "Guys, ghosts!" Everybody panicked and started running. They ran approximately a distance of 2 or something kilometers with the ghost following in a steady hovering pace a few meters behind. When they reached the village's first street lamp, they were all exhausted underneath the light. The ghost stopped a few meters away behind them. For a few seconds, both the ghost and the kids stared at each other. Then the ghost vanished in thin air. Others had also seen the priest with the same description and the characteristics at the time. It was a well-known legend. There are no modern reports or encounters with this specific ghost today, though. Some of the children died in the following years due to old age or medical problems, but some are alive today, being grown-ups and have confirmed the story to be true, recalling the same events my father's told me. I think 2 or 3 others have confirmed the story. The area today is heavily guarded by border police and the military. It's almost impossible to go to at night. It's also extremely dangerous due to illegal immigrants crossing the border, with the reports of incidents of robberies making the excursion to the site virtually impossible and extremely dangerous. A creepy encounter my cousin experienced. This encounter happened in her house in 2021. It's around 6:30 in the morning. She woke up, left her room, went to the kitchen to drink water. She opened the fridge, drank water, and closed the fridge. A second after closing the fridge door, she sees the following. A little girl-looking entity was peeking through the side of the door. She was pale, almost transparent gray, with long black similar to the Enchantress from the Suicide Squad and black eyes similar to Funko Pop. It was completely emotionless, but she, my cousin, could feel the innocence and the curiosity of a child to see what you're doing. My cousin's exact description of the entity. On another instance, she was minding her own business in a room when she heard her name being distinctly called from another room by an unknown voice. Back in the day, before my cousin lived in the house, a family used to live there. They had a boy that died in the house because he fell off the balcony. The boy was young, but his age isn't known. My cousin has theorized that the boy's spirit might still be living in the house. Terrifyingly terrifying. So my uncle was put into an asylum last year. He swore he saw his brother, my father, in the kitchen of the house that we all share. My uncle, myself, my mom, my little brother, and our cousins, my uncle's kid, we all live in one house together. Because her family's kind of poor and we can only afford one house between the lot of us. My dad worked for the army, so he was deployed to different countries a lot. We hadn't seen him since just before Christmas, which we had to celebrate a little bit early that year due to my father's departure the day before Christmas. About a month had passed since my dad was deployed, before my uncle shouted his name happily from the kitchen. Me, my brother, and my cousin rushed into the kitchen to find my uncle stood there alone and confused. "Where is he?" my brother asked. "He was right here. I swear he was," my uncle replied. Moments later, there was a loud knock at the door. My mother actually answered it to find another soldier outside holding my father's uniform and tag necklace. Mother didn't cry, at least not then. Her wails echoed every hallway at nighttime, though. She just wanted to be brave in front of the kids, myself included. My father was dead, so how could my uncle have seen him? Nobody spoke to my uncle for weeks. They thought that he saw the soldier coming down the pathway to the front door and made it all up as a sick joke that he thought his brother might have been found funny. My uncle went crazy in the weeks that nobody spoke to him. Absolutely insane. He muttered to himself, he lashed out at everybody, and he roamed the streets at nighttime shouting and causing a fuss, telling random strangers that what he saw was real. Nobody believed him. 2 police officers brought him home to us the night before and decided to put him in an asylum for everybody's safety. When we left the asylum the following day, after leaving my uncle there, we arrived back home shortly after. I looked over at our kitchen window to find my father shaking his head at me. I froze in my tracks, I rubbed my eyes, but when I opened them again, he was gone. What the fuck happened to me that day? Was my uncle telling the truth? Seems worthy of an investigation. Am I being dramatic, or did I bring something from my parents' house to my own? Okay, so to start at the very beginning, when I was still living at my parents' house, I had a few paranormal encounters. I would be seeing deceased family members in my room and such, but I never ever felt anything negative or anything like that. And during this time, my grandma gave me a bronze crucifix to hang in my room, which I did, it's above my door. But it belonged to her grandparents, so it's old. My grandma's 80. And since I placed it in my room, my TV started switching on and off by itself. It even stayed on one time after I unplugged it from the wall. At my parents' house, I didn't use it much, so I kept it unplugged. Fast forward to years to the current day. I live on my own now, but I did bring the TV. I left the crucifix at my parents', but I think I did bring something over here, and again, nothing negative. I've seen things spin without any wind around, and I hear a voice every now and then, which I always just tell myself is probably the house. But my TV still switches on and off by itself. Now the weird part about this is I use it on pretty often, and I always turn it completely off when I leave or go to sleep. It rarely happens that it turns on by itself when I'm in the room, but when I leave for work or just head into town for a bit, it's almost a given the TV turned off while I was away. It's so strange to me, because some days it doesn't do anything, but I'd leave to visit my parents for a weekend, say something like that, and I'll come back and the TV's on. Sorry for the long story, but I'm just seeing things maybe, or do we think this could be more? It's not harmful to me, so I don't need to undertake any action, but I want to know what you guys think. My experience. I wouldn't call myself a complete believer of the paranormal, but I'm not somebody who writes it off completely. I'm a skeptic that's open and willing to believe if given proof. I have family that's deeply involved with this type of stuff. They have their own experiences with the paranormal. I've got a few things that happen to me that I can't entirely explain normally. However, the one I'm about to describe is by far the one that, has no type of logic that can debunk, or at least to my knowledge. To better understand my experience, you have to understand the layout of my bathroom that it happened to me in. It was in the shower. On my second floor, there's 4 rooms, counting the bathroom. You walk up the stairs and you will see one room straight across from the base of the stairs, while 2 rooms follow the wall on the right side to said room, and finishing with a room mirroring the one at the base of the stairs. Once you enter the bathroom, immediately to your right is the sink and mirror. The sink is about 4-ish feet off the ground. Next to the sink is my bath and shower, blocked by a wall so it doesn't connect to my sink. Straight across from the door is the toilet. I had my door closed. No one else in the bathroom nor any pets. Since my shower is also a bathtub, there's a ledge where me and my family members will keep shampoos and body wash. I began to wash my hair and I placed the shampoo on the ledge. As I go to put it down, I placed it a bit too close to the edge and it fell off. I heard the bottle roll around a bit and ultimately come to a stop. I think, I'll grab it when I get out. I begin to finish up in the shower, get out to grab my towel, blah, 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 blah. And I look at the ground to find the shampoo bottle, and I'm like, just can't. After a few seconds of searching, I look up to see the bottle sitting perfectly on the sink. Again, the sink is about 4 feet off the ground. I heard it rolling on the ground, and there's a wall separating my bath and sink. I've asked my family members if they did it or somebody was just messing with me, but to this day, no one's claimed to do it. Anybody have any form of explanation of this? If that is ghost-related, that is a very polite ghost. Thank the ghost. Sold my haunted house to a developer. I always felt like things were off, just vibes mostly. Like I, as an adult, would never go to the basement alone. It felt off. I would hear noises. It was a 150-year-old farmhouse. I'm sure many passed away in it through the years. We were selling the house and it was torn down by a developer. As soon as we started this negotiation, things got weirder. When things were finalized, it got very weird. I ran out in my bare feet to just grab something from the car right out front. When I came back, all the doors were locked. I was locked out of the house and no one else was home. The next day I was sitting on the couch and something started pounding on the wall. That's the wall the couch was against. It was in various spots, getting louder and louder. I actually went outside to see if somebody was pounding on the outside of the house. The closest house on that side's about 1,500 meters away. Nothing. No one was there. I kept hearing loud bangs, and so I smudged the house and asked them to move on. I don't remember exactly what I was advised to say. I never experienced anything again. The house has now been demolished. I haven't felt it follow us to the new house, but I swear something was going on. And I'm a very rational person, but I do believe in paranormal stuff. I usually think people are making it up, though. I had this, huge feeling of, get out of this house, it's not yours. That's just how it felt. I didn't hear a voice, but I've never felt more compelled to leave somewhere as I did in those few days. Anyways, I hope they found peace. Sometimes loved ones like to hang around. So I've had weird experiences through most of my childhood. Over the past 6 years or so, I seem to just know things. I remember when I was at a small get-together at a friend's house. Some guys I hadn't met were sitting by the fire pit watching the flames. I had this overwhelming urge to tell them that she's sad. Doesn't seem like much, but it was horribly overwhelming. I struck up a conversation and found out essentially that his sister had passed recently, but people had been telling him she's still around. Didn't think much of it and chalked it up to a coincidence. I've had little gut feelings on or off for a few years, but nothing really worth noting until about 2 or 3 years ago. I was working at a popular game store when 2 women came in. They went over to the discount shirts and found a few Rick and Morty shirts, and now when they came in, I had one of those weird gut feelings that I get before the weird message passing urge happens. As they made small talk with me, one of them made a comment about how they had been looking for Rick and Morty shirts when their brother's funeral happened and just couldn't find any. Following what I guess you could say was intuition, as well as I saw him out of the corner of my eye at one point, I started asking if he had, these physical descriptions. I went over height, hair color, length, nose shape, facial hair, and color. They both began to look a bit uncomfortable and asked if I knew him while they showed me a picture. The picture was in fact the man I saw. I was getting an almost image in my head, if that makes sense. I told them I didn't know him, but that they were going to think I was crazy. I told them he was present and was able to, in pretty effective detail, about how recently he had passed and the full detail of why he had passed. By this point, all 3 of us were tearing up, and from there, I was able to intuitively pass on essentially a message from him to them. Cue the ugly crying at that point from all 3 of us. Earlier that week, another stranger had come up to them and told them that he was around them too. After I told them what I was essentially picking up from him, I stopped feeling anything particular. Had a few other pretty heavy instances, but those are for another time. Haunted house experiences. This all took place in the mid-90s in a little town called Ottawa in Kansas. These are all true stories of experiences I had while living in that house. I'll post the experiences in chronological order, but first we'll describe the layout of the house. From front to back, you walk into the den. Moving forward, you enter the kitchen with a doorway to your right that leads to a bathroom and a master bedroom. If you continue through the kitchen, it leads to a dining room and a living room on the left. If you go through the dining room further to the back of the house, it leads to a doorless room that we used for a computer room. And then 2 more bedrooms in the back. I put all this here because over the years, family members switched rooms. First experience happened not really long after moving in, and at the time my mom had started a new relationship. We moved in with him. His mom also lived there, and she had a master bedroom at the front of the house. My mom and her new boyfriend had the room at the very back of the house, and I was in the room next to them. One night I heard all of my mom's music boxes start playing. She had these painted clowns and such, and they sat on satin pillows and played music. They weren't creepy to me until this night. Anyways, I hear them all going off, and in my kid mind, I'm just pissed that my mom's in there playing when she just told me it was bedtime. But they just kept playing all at the same time. It was years later that she, my mom, finally told me that she was not playing with them. Experience 2 is probably the scariest experience of my life. I was still in one of the back bedrooms, but by this time my step-grandma had moved out, so my mom and her boyfriend were in the master bedroom at the front of the house. I was alone in the back. I have siblings, but they were back and forth between my mom and dad, so at this point I was the only kid there. My mom and I had just come home from Walmart, and she'd gotten me The Nightmare Before Christmas on VHS. Yep, showing my age. It was late, so she said I could watch it the next day. So I put it on my dresser and went to bed. It was still wrapped in cellophane and still in the Walmart bag. As I was falling asleep, I heard the plastic of the bag, and even with my nightlight, I couldn't see anything. I was scared though, so I gently tossed my big white cat Muffin Man onto the floor at the foot of the bed in hopes that he would scare whatever it was away. Instead, he took off like a bat out of hell. I kept hearing the plastic and was literally petrified. I couldn't even scream. I was in so much fear. I eventually woke up, and when I did, the movie was out of its case and on the floor. I simply can't explain how. Experience 3. I had a friend staying over, and this story still gives her chills. She had recently lost her mom in a car accident, and this was another attempt of her sleeping over. She would try, but she missed her mom and just wanted to be with her family. But this time, she stayed the whole night. The experience itself wasn't scary for me, but I had a poster of The Crow. It was my first poster ever, and I loved it. But when I woke up, it was tacked upside down. I wouldn't have done that to Brandon Lee, and when my friend saw, well, she just turned white, never spent the night again. So I know it wasn't her, and at that time my little brother was living with us again, but there's no way he could have reached the tacks at the top of the poster. My fourth experience was probably the second scariest. We had cats, Muffin Man, still loved me, but one day, middle of the day, my brother was down the street playing football at the school, and I was home alone with my mom. I was in the computer room and she was in the kitchen. The day before, my little brother had been pretending he had caught an alien. He had a huge plaster E.T. piggy bank that was probably 1, maybe 2 feet tall. It was ridiculous, really. But he had a rope tied around it because he had caught it, you know. So at the computer, and all of a sudden I hear a loud crash from the rooms in the back. And here comes my cat Jarrow at the same end of the rope tied around her tail. Mind you, Jarrow was a tortie. They're kind of known for just being all around crazy. But for anything to keep that cat still long enough to tie something around her tail is kind of mind-boggling. But something did, and broke off E.T.'s head in the process. I can't explain any of these experiences. My mom ended up having a priest come in and bless her home. He stole my stone collection and my dream catcher. Still pissed about that. But we did a little bit of research and found out that the property had burned down. I can't remember the dates now, but I don't think the spirit was demonic. I think it was a little girl named Margaret. Curious what everybody else thinks. I'll do a little digging and see if I can find any information about the fire. Paranormal School. My friends and I, who I will refer to as A, E, S, and D, if necessary, have been getting into paranormal investigations over the past few years. We aren't professionals by any means, nor do we claim to be. It's just something that we enjoy doing whenever we're all, able to get together. We've gone to a few supposedly haunted locations and done some investigations, but nothing prepared us for what we would experience in this story. So one day we were discussing where we should go for our next paranormal investigation. We had just finished another investigation a couple of nights prior, so we were still feeling brave from that. As we were discussing where we should go, one of our friends suggested that we should check out this old abandoned school in rural Tennessee. We had heard stories about this school from videos on YouTube and just online searches. If you know the story about the boy who was bullied to death and buried underneath the floorboards, then you'll know what school I'm referring to. If you don't know the story, then I'll give you a brief summary. A young boy was cornered in the boys' bathroom at this school by a bully. The bully beat him up so badly that he ended up succumbing to his injuries and died on the spot. The bully, in a panic, realizing what he had just done, decided to pull up some of the floorboards with his pocket knife and stash the body underneath them. Because of how brutal it was, it's said that something very dark and malevolent is said to haunt that school, as well as the boy. Some even speculate that the dark spirit is what drove the bully to take it so far and kill the boy. Now back to the story. Sadly, our friend A wasn't able to come with us in this investigation, so I invited another one of my friends who I'll refer to as H. H wasn't really into the paranormal like the rest of us are, but agreed to come anyways, just to hang out and have something to do. So we all got into our cars and drove to the school, hoping to have some paranormal experiences and maybe even capture some paranormal evidence that we could show off online. When we got to the school, we quickly realized that the pictures and videos that we'd seen online did not do the real thing justice. It was creepy. The entire place was covered in shrubbery, vines, and graffiti. The windows had been busted out and the doors were off their hinges, presumably from all the local kids looking to get a rush by breaking into and exploring a creepy abandoned school. We walked around the school and eventually found the entrance to the basement, which apparently you are not supposed to go into. Especially the boiler room. Not just because the whole building was on the brink of collapse, but also because that's where it primarily lives. So of course, that's one of the first places we wanted to go. We walked around the basement and did some exploring, just to survey the area and get a better idea of, where we wanted to begin our investigation. We eventually did find the boiler room, and at first glance it didn't seem like anything special. Just some broken down equipment, graffiti walls thrown around, trash, and, random school chairs sitting in the corner. E laughed and made the comment, "Must not be a very powerful spirit if this is where it has to live." We all let out a little bit of a chuckle in agreement and continued on our way through the basement. Thinking back on it now, that may not have been the best comment to make about this thing and its home. We exited the basement and went into the main area of the school. The main area wasn't in any better condition than the basement. Graffiti and trash were everywhere. The ceiling was falling in and the floor was collapsing in some areas. We explored the halls, some classrooms, the gym, and we even found the bathroom where the bullied boy was supposedly buried underneath the floorboards. After exploring a little while longer, we decided to start our investigation. We set up a couple of cameras, motion sensor lights, and voice recorders in some of the classrooms, the hall, and the bathroom. As we were doing our investigation, 3 of us were in one of the classrooms while myself and H were in the hall right outside. The 3 of us that were in the classroom were playing around with some dowsing rods and a spirit box. If you don't know what a dowsing rod is, they're basically 2 copper rods that can spin freely. They're used as a way to, have spirits communicate with you, either by crossing the rods or pointing. The spirit box is a device that quickly cycles through radio waves, allows spirits to talk through the frequencies. As they were asking their questions in the classroom, myself and H were staring down the hall. At the end of this hall is what we assumed was a staircase, but we couldn't be too sure because we couldn't reach that area due to the floor having collapsed. As myself and our friend are looking down this hall, we heard a loud bang come from the far end where the staircase was. We quickly shined our lights in the direction of the noise, but we didn't see anything. We kept watching for a minute just in case something or someone came out. But after a couple of minutes, nothing. We just assumed it was an animal or something. Eventually, I made my way into the classroom with the others while H stayed in the hall. As we're asking our questions and hoping for a response through the dowsing rods or the spirit box, I noticed H in the hall. He was ghostly white and fixated on the area where we had heard that noise prior. I asked him, "What's wrong?" To which he says, "I don't want to freak you guys out, but I swear I just saw someone poke their head out from around the corner and look right at me." We were all kind of like, "Well, it's probably just your mind playing tricks on you." But he was still very insistent on what he saw. Now, we had seen and heard things during our investigations before, but something about the way H looked had us all a little bit spooked. H insisted that we should move on to another area, so we obliged him and went back to the main foyer where we had entered. We were standing there talking about where we should go next when we hear what sounded like a child's laugh coming from the classroom where we had just been. We all instinctively shut up and froze in place. Finally, our friend S broke the silence. What was that? Eventually, he built up the courage to go see what it was. He started to make his way back to the classroom when something told me that it wasn't safe for him to go back in there. I quickly grabbed his arm and I said, "I don't think that's a good idea," to which he brushed off and proceeded to head toward the classroom. A split second later, we heard a loud crunch and a crash come from the room, so we all ran to see what it was. When we reached the classroom, we were horrified to see that the floor had collapsed right where we had been standing moments earlier. Had something not told me that it wasn't safe, I wouldn't have grabbed his arm, and he'd probably be at the bottom of the school right now, if not dead and very hurt. As we stood there in shock of what had happened, we began to feel very grateful that the floor hadn't collapsed while we were all standing in there. We decided that that was enough of the classrooms and made our way into the gym. The floors felt much safer in there. We continued our investigation, and thinking back now, we should have left after a friend almost died, but we were dumb and we wanted to go on. I took the dowsing rods and began asking those generic questions. "Is anyone there? Can you tell us your name?" Eventually, I asked the question, "Can you point to where you are?" To my surprise, the rods pointed in the direction of the darker corner of the gym. "Guys, come here. I'm getting responses." Now, they weren't pointing in the corner anymore. They were following E. Now might be a good time to mention that this is the same guy who almost fell through the floor and the guy who made the sly comment in the basement about the thing's home. I'm not saying that he was being targeted by this thing, but it sure seemed like it at this point. No matter where he moved, the rods followed him. He went left, they followed. He went right, they followed. He ran around, they followed full circle. This creeped us out beyond belief, so we wanted to know why the rods were following him. As we asked our questions as to why the rods were following him, someone eventually asked, "Are you mad at him?" And then in an instant, the rods went straight and unnaturally still, and the room fell quiet. So quiet, in fact, that it was as if we all had fell deaf instantaneously. I got this insanely bad feeling as if something very evil had just entered the room. A few seconds later, I felt something strong physically grab the ends of the rods in my hands. Whatever was grabbing them began thrashing them back and forth with enough force to move my whole body as if they were trying to break them from my grip. As this was happening, noises started coming from all around the school. It sounded like doors and lockers slamming, things being thrown down the halls and all around us, and screaming. Though, admittedly, the screaming may have been coming from us, but it didn't help our situation by any means. We were all terrified. We had never experienced anything like this before. Then H, the same guy who saw the thing at the end of the hall, pointed in the direction of the dark corner of the gym, let out a guttural, blood-curdling scream. We didn't ever bother to look and see what he was pointing or screaming at. The only thing in our mind at this point was, get out now! We all quickly grabbed our things, sprinted out of the school back to our cars. We got in and peeled out of there as fast as we could. We met back up at my place, still obviously shaken up by what had just happened, and, well, after taking a while to process this experience and decompress, we asked H what he had seen. He tells us that as everything was going on, he looked into the corner of the gym and saw something horrifying. He described seeing a massive thing, probably 7 feet tall, standing in the corner. It had unnaturally long arms that were spread out wide, with its head having long devilish horns. Its mouth was open so wide that you could probably fit your head into it. He said on top of that, though, on this unusually large mouth was a smile more evil than you could ever imagine. Knowing that something like that was so close to us was bone-chilling. In my opinion, we were lucky to make it out alive. We've never returned to that school and have no intention on ever going back. As far as we're concerned, if that old school was demolished and the rubble was burned, they'd be doing the world a favor. Maybe it would destroy, or at least very least trap, whatever that thing was in there for good. If you know the school, I highly suggest that you never go inside or even go onto the property. Save yourself the possible trauma. Believe what you want. That night will forever be burned into our minds and haunt us in our nightmares. I saw my late father in my dream, and I'm terrified. I lost my dad when I was 16, just short of my 17th birthday from pancreatic cancer. Over time, I've had some experiences smelling his vape smoke, though we don't have his vape or anything like it in the house. Hearing his voice and the typical signs you get from a deceased loved one. But this time was strange, and I've now had a sign from him since. Or rather, not. It's been a few months, and I thought I'd share my experience here. I got home from school and work one day and decided to curl up in my father's recliner and take a nap. Though I woke back up in my room, I knew nothing was right, and I was slightly conscious. My ex-girlfriend had gotten up to go across the hall to the bathroom. I then see my mom standing at my desk, seemingly looking at something. I couldn't tell what. As I'm sitting here confused, my ex comes back into the room and gets in bed. Not noticing I was even awake, my mom's heading over the bed, her not noticing either. Even after saying, "Mom," a few times. At this point, I'm basically sitting up when my dad walks in. I start flipping out, crying and screaming, and I knew this wasn't right. I knew that he was gone, and there was no reason my dad should be there. My ex starts asking me what's wrong and tries to calm me down as if she doesn't see my dad or my mom really standing in front of the bed. I yell, "I can fucking see my dad." No sooner than I finish that statement does my dad speak. It's the most heartbreaking shit, isn't it? My dream then ended, and I woke up, terrified and sad, and I think this dream more often than not, I'd like to admit. I have no idea what it means. I've experienced a lot of paranormal in my life. Most of my life I've encountered ghosts and beings I can't really explain, other than not being human or entirely there. I've encountered a lot of it with my younger brother as we're always together. It started around when I was 15. I started noticing when I was home alone I'd hear faint voices, sometimes feel really, really cold chills for no reason. Later on, this became kind of way more visual, even to adulthood. Then one day, me and my brother, and we'll call him Cole, were home alone. We lived in a big one-story house, so I asked him if he would follow me to the bathroom. I had a creepy feeling. So he did. As I was doing my business, he saw a reflection in a picture frame and told me that somebody was in our old playroom. I got up to check it out, and there stood a man, transparent, made of this strange matter that seemed to have properties similar to being dense as smoke. Yet it evaporated into thin air like steam. He was staring at my wall with a stone cross pendant I'd put there. The craziest thing is that this thing levitated towards us when we ran out of the house screaming. This was a long time ago, but me and my brother seemed to encounter these ghosts, creatures, or beings pretty often. Even till our late 20s. Every time we had the chance to get evidence, our electronics die or turn off. And when I see them, they're usually like missing facial features or of only one. Mostly eyes or black pits. Second, some are transparent and some aren't. Weirdly, most always, they're made of this weird, smoky substance. I thought it was his sister. The problem with these creatures and things, like ghosts, is it's hard to explain an experience without seeming like a crazy fool. However, I feel that it is time to share. I want to connect to people who have had similar experiences with the unknown. I'll tell you now, even a large track number of running into these things, I'm heavily skeptical on what these things are, and always learn or lean, whichever one they want. And I always learn or lean to disapprove them. A few years ago, I decided to head out to the country to meet my friend. Let's call him Brandon. Let's go. Brandon was a college buddy of mine who had quit college and became, like, Wielder or Weirder or Wilder, one of those. He made good cash at an early age and had a house built on his family land, which he wanted to show off to me during a nice sunny day. I won't lie, I loved his place. His family owned a huge patch of acres, and this place was built like the ultimate man cave. Anyways, after arriving, me and my old friend did the usual catching up and played a few games on his PS4. Everything was normal, until Brandon went out to get beers and pizza. He had left me alone to play some Mortal Kombat on his 75-inch 4K TV. It was normal for 15 minutes of his departure until I had heard running downstairs. I decided to look downstairs to see what was happening. I saw a little girl with frizzy hair run past the bottom of the stairs with Brandon's dog sitting at the middle of the stairs watching her run past. I was like, cool, Brandon's kid sister walked from his parents to his place to stay. Thought nothing of it as I had seen kids outside his place playing outside. Brandon returned with Domino's pizza, wings, and beer. I decided to tell him that I saw his kid sister running on the first floor. The guy looked at me spooked. He said he didn't have a kid sister and that the kids had left as soon as I pulled up. The weird part is he got kind of excited and thought, dude, you saw her. I had to make him explain. So Brandon told me a story that happened 3 weeks prior to me coming. He had some guys over drinking during the night and they decided to crash in the room that we were in. As they slept on the floor, one of the guys started screaming, which prompted them to roll over to see. He said there was a girl with black hair standing at the base of the stairs staring at them in the dark, and as soon as they saw her, she darted downstairs. He stated that they turned the lights on, searched the place for her, but she was nowhere to be seen. He was happy I saw her, because this means that, well, what happened to him was real. When I analyzed the event on my own, I noticed that there wasn't a back door to the house, and when the girl appeared, there was a lot of dust that looked like smoke as she ran past the stairs. Usually, ghosts or entities always seem to be made of this smoke that's been kind of sharing properties of mist. Strangely, she seemed so solid and full of saturation that when she ran past, it really made me think, was noticing that the dog seemed confused when he saw it too. This was such a strange event, as they didn't live in the neighborhood, so there was no neighbors. This event is still such a mystery to me. An unknown cat appeared before somebody important in my life passed away, and a lot of paranormal appeared. On April 1st, 2024, an extremely important person in my life passed away before the age of 40. I'm 30 years old and coming to 31. During the last week of March of this year, a mysterious cat appeared on my doorstep. Every time I came back home during that specific week, the cat would always run extremely close to me while waiting upstairs at my apartment door. What was weird was that on the very last day, 03/31/2024, as I was going to work in the morning the last time I saw that cat gave me a death stare in the morning. This is extremely important, because the person who passed away, her cat passed away on 03/25/2023 last year, the same week it approached my doorstep. So when this person passed away on 4/01/2024, I found out the news on social media through a post her sister made about her passing, along with her final few posts updating her life. Her second to last update was about her sickness on a closed post. It was 10 days after my birthday, 09/02, which is 09/12/24. So many dates, which is 09/12/2024, and the third to last post on Instagram was an update about her sickness on 04/13/2023, which is Cambodia New Year, a holiday that my ethnicity celebrates. Isn't that Lunar New Year? I tried my best to reach out to her, even though she was on the other side of the world. I did favors and great things for people she loved without telling her, but I'm pretty sure she knows. This person changed my life because she allowed me to work with amazing people in Tokyo, in the Japan fashion industry. She loved the work and brand that I did because I did things out of love and faith. But when I was losing faith in myself, the brand this year, my guts felt like the direction I was going in my life this year, working with people from the underworld and not focusing on the project that got us working together, was driving her crazy, but I can't assume that. When she passed away, it broke my heart on April Fool's Day. I cried a lot to the point that many people thought I was crazy, but my close friend told me, "The person who passed away chose you to be her favorite, and now her spirit is guiding you to do great things and telling you to take your life more seriously, and to embrace where you're from." I wasn't a believer in God or spirituality, but this recent death has made life crazier and crazier. So when it was Cambodia New Year on 4/13/2024, for the first time in my life I saw a triple rainbow. It was partly raining. I noticed that many of my bad habits that I was doing started to make sense. How crazy I sounded. I hope people understand this post. I mean, she understood that I had a complex past, looked past it, and was the first person to believe in my fashion career, offering me a lot of advice. As Cambodians, we're spiritual people, and the people who passed away as Japanese. I've heard that Japanese people are extremely spiritual and deeply faithful. I know I sound crazy, but life is beautiful and real. You got that right. Childhood experiences. So I've never shared this with anybody except my wife and my mother. Growing up, we lived in an old townhouse complex. I used to wake up terrified, unable to move anything really at all except for my eyes. There would be a man standing at the foot of my bed. He would be wearing a cowboy hat with his arms crossed. He would just stand there and then be gone, and then I could move again. This happened to me from the ages of about 6 to 12 until we moved. Not every night, but probably about once a month or so. I never told any about it for years. I just kept it all to myself. In my early 20s, I was visiting my parents. Finally told my mother about what used to happen. She was absolutely floored, and then went on to tell me that we lived in that house that used to happen to her as well. And for about the same amount of years, until we moved and they bought the house that they now live in. I'm not quite sure how to explain the feeling of both relief and terror. I mean, I felt this knowing that A, I wasn't crazy, and B, this man was also troubling my mom. My dad worked in a remote work camp and was gone 15 days at a time. This only ever happened when he was away. We talked to him about it after we discovered that we both had these experiences, and he's kind of just thinks we're nuts. I just wanted to share this. I drove past the old house that this happened to me in, and even just being close to it gave me the creeps. I remember once my grandmother come to visit and we'd lived there, and I'll never forget she just looked around and said, "This is a busy place." Another strange thing that used to occur in the same house. We had 2 cats and they used to just sit at the bottom of the stairs and look up at the landing. Like they were watching someone. The landing at the top overlooked the stairs, and it used to feel like someone was looking down at me when going up all at the same time. The one cat that we had, he would just sit there sometimes for an hour or more staring. The bedrooms are on the top floor. Anyways, thanks for reading. Feels good to have gotten this written down, and I'll also add, I have had no other experience since then. When we first moved, I was terrified that whatever used to haunt my nights would find me. The house my parents bought was only about 2 blocks away. My girlfriend's experience. What do you guys think? My girlfriend lives with her parents, and one night at about 3 a.m. in the morning, girlfriend's mom was called out to my girlfriend to be on alert, because the doorknob to the parents' room was moving like somebody was trying to get in. My girlfriend's also heard the sounds. Her father wasn't home, so they didn't come out thinking somebody has broken into their house. And in the morning, they searched the house for any clues about what's happened. Nothing's been stolen, and all the doors have been locked, including the windows. Girlfriend's grandpa died about 2 weeks ago. What do you guys think? She doesn't take this seriously, even though they're living in a neighborhood which has drug addicts and burglars, and I wish it was a ghost rather than a human, to be honest. About a year ago, there's some instance where the ceiling of their house produced, I don't know a correct word, sorry about that, an unknown sound like somebody walking or things like that. Her father checked by using flashlight, but didn't see anyone. My girlfriend's told me that she used to see a white spirit in her house. It didn't do her any harm, but she felt a presence, and whenever she wanted to do little things would happen. Like if she wanted to find a lost book, the book was on top of her table the next day. Things like that. She got afraid of it after some time and gave her holy water and a rosary, and after that, nothing like that ever happened again. Sounds like a helpful ghost to me. A phone call from inside the couch. I live in a strange house, built in 1994, but it was sold off from one of the old farms in Austin. Like all of South Austin. So there's always been a strange vibe, and it doesn't help I have an old farm structure literally behind my house. I have lots of ghost stories here, and this is since I was little. Still live here at 24. But there was one weird thing that just never sat with me. Everything else I can explain skeptically. I am a believer, but not everything's a ghost. I rarely even tell this one when swapping ghost stories. So in 2018, maybe 2019, I'm with my sibling and we're super stoned. Like sitting on the closet couch to the like sitting on the closest couch to the smoke spot stoned. We're chatting and we both have our phones out. Suddenly we hear something dialing. Like one of our stupid asses is butt dialing someone. So I tell my sibling to check their phone and nothing. Get a little bit nervous at this point, but I check my phone. The black screen scared me a little bit, but I wasn't calling anybody. Then the worst thing happened. We heard the line pick up and a man answered and said, "Hello?" That was the end of the mystery call, because my sibling and I jumped up. We were so scared and unsettled. The voice came from a crack of the couch. We have a recliner that connects two seats with a fairly inconveniently large gap of fabric, that couch cushion, and it's like held by the joints of the couch. So in theory, somebody could have dropped their phone down into the couch, and maybe we activated somebody's Siri to call someone, but there was no phone. Checked the next day, and we both checked our phones, which were on the other side of the crack. We both heard the sound at the same time, so it wasn't like the scary thought it was put into somebody's head and it grew. We just heard someone's phone dialing out, and even in my memory I hear the dialing coming from the crack of the couch. Things sometimes fall into the crack and are gone forever. Sometimes only a few months. "1800s farmhouse turned to daycare." I used to work at a daycare that used to be an old farmhouse built in Texas. It was in the hill country in the mid-1800s. I worked there for about 8 months, and I had some crazy stories from it. The original house was a 2-story wood building. The stone stables not even sealed, plus an old well. Then they added on 2 other houses as the family expanded. Simple 1 room and a bathroom. Half the family was also buried on the property. There's 5 or 6 graves there, I believe. Some of the people there are D.B. and his brother Calvin. William Sabra died in childbirth in the main house, and a little girl named Harriet. There were also 3 grave markers for each grave. One was a super old stonemaker. The next was a bronze maker that stuck out of the ground on poles, and the last one was a more recent headstone that had clear writing and dates. The kids at the daycare would love to walk around the cemetery, which was surrounded by a waist-high stone wall. Just some setup of scenery before we begin with the haunt. The daycare had been at this location since 2019 or 2020, right before the pandemic started. The stories from teachers and children started to pile up. Kids would ask us about the woman upstairs and the little girl who would vanish. The woman upstairs got so bad that we had to tarp up the stairs, really, so kids would stop looking up there and talking to nothing. We were all scared of the attic as well. I started in the baby room, which is an add-on to the main house built in the 40s. I closed in the beginning, so for the last hour or so of work, I would be in there alone in the house with 1 or 2 babies. It wasn't too bad in the first few weeks. Most of that happened was babies pointing to the same corner with a eyes open, mouth open face. A few creaks and groans and normal old house stuff. But one day a baby was sitting by folding doors. And they connected to my room to the main room, and the door popped open and slammed the baby to the ground. Got up and stuck my head to the door and yelled at the kid who just attacked my baby, only to find the room empty. So I picked up the little guy and we sat out on the porch until his mom came. But then I switched roles and I opened up the toddler room, which was a mud bunkhouse added last, in the late 80s. I opened the center at 7 a.m. and then had about an hour being alone before another person would step foot onto the campus. The change was spooky. It would be dark when I'd pull up as I would start opening the doors and unlocking everything. And I swear each time I'd enter a room, it was as though I was interrupting a conversation about me. I would long for a parent to show up just to show I have some company. Early in October, I took my ex by to help me with some things around my classroom. When halfway through, we went to take a brain break and walk around the property. We walked to the graves and then down to the old creek bed. We admittedly started to get kind of hot and heavy when I heard a woman shushing a man to calm down. I also heard a little bit of a kid playing, so I stopped and we began to sheepishly walk back up. I thought a family had pulled up to play on the property over the weekend, as the director would approve of that beforehand if they ask. Once we rounded a tree and hit the open part of the hike down to the graves, the voice stopped. I asked my ex if they heard it too. He told nothing. So that Halloween we informed the director that we would be hosting a ghost hunt. I went through a ghost hunting phase and we had a lot of equipment. So my ex, myself, and 2 coworkers went after dark to see what was up. First thing, the property was so dark. It's far enough away from town that there's no light pollution and there's no streetlights either. As we sit in the main room, we ask them if they know who we are and if, what we're going to do there. They do. They don't like how we're spoiling the kids, apparently. Big corporal punishment supporters. But secondly, as we asked them to join us, the back door to the mudrooms opened, and then we heard footsteps as they stopped right in the archway of the main room. Then from above we heard even clearer footsteps walking across the attic and stopping at the stairs. We asked them to come down, and step by step the stairs creaked under some invisible weight. They stopped right outside our circle. The entity could spell names of children at the daycare, and we could correctly verify the schedule that we ran things. We stayed for a few hours before we all got nervous and split. Little did I know that night, one of our farm cats, Cola, had gotten locked in the baby room, and when I went to unlock the building the next morning, the black cat jumped out of the seat that he was on and ran right into me, scaring more than anything else had ever scared me at that school. Ending with the cat. Nice. See ya.